Hello learners, welcome to EPG Pathshala and this module on the methods of measuring blood pressure. Now, what is blood pressure? Can you visualize an aqua pump irrigating an agriculture field through a series of tubes? The pumping action of the aqua pump not only pumps out the water but creates the force which propels the water out of the pump and keeps it flowing through the conducting tubes for long distances to areas in the field far away from the pump. Can you tell me which of these, the forceful pump, the channelizing tubes, or the propelling pressure, is important for the flow of water? Yes, you're right. All three are equally important for the movement of water through the tubes. Let us apply this example to the context of blood circulation. The heart is the central pump irrigating or facilitating blood circulation to all the regions of the body through a series of tubes, namely the blood vessels. By definition, blood pressure is the lateral pressure exerted by blood on the vessel walls while flowing through it. That is, it is the force imposed by the blood on the walls of the blood vessel at right angles to its direction of flow as it travels inside the blood vessel. Four terms are in common use, namely systolic pressure, that is the maximum pressure during systole, diastolic pressure, the minimum pressure during diastole, pulse pressure, the difference between systolic and accepted diastolic pressure, the mean pressure, which is roughly the arithmetic mean of the diastolic and the systolic pressure. But a close approximation to the mean pressure may be obtained by adding the diastolic pressure with 1/3 of the pulse pressure. In the true sense, it is the level of the line halving area between the pulse wave contour and the diastolic pressure level. In adults, the relation between the three pressures is as follows. Systolic pressure over diastolic pressure is to pulse pressure is equal to 3:2:1. That is, if systolic pressure is 120, diastolic pressure should be 80 and pulse pressure 40 millimeters of mercury. Next, we move on to the term basal blood pressure. What is basal blood pressure? Let me explain. When an individual is with the least possible amount of strain or stress, his blood pressure is generally considered as the basal blood pressure. It may also be regarded as the lowest pressure necessary to maintain blood flow sufficient for the needs of the body. When a subject is in a reclining state, 5 to 6 hours after the last meal in a comfortably warm room, after resting for at least 30 to 40 minutes with a mind at possible ease, the basal pressure is recorded. Here, you can see the basal blood pressure measured with the person reclining in the basal conditions. In adult males, the average systolic pressure is 125 to 130 millimeters of mercury plus or minus 15, that is from 110.15 millimeters of mercury, and an average diastolic pressure is 70 to 90 millimeters of mercury. Although it is constant in a given individual, yet basal pressure varies in different persons because of several factors, namely called as the physiological variation. To begin with, age is a very important factor. Blood pressure increases with age. During infancy, the systolic pressure is from 70 to 90 millimeters of mercury. During childhood, it increases to 90 to 110 millimeters of mercury. At puberty, it is 110 to 120 millimeters of mercury. Old age, 140 to 150 millimeters of mercury. At any age, a systolic pressure persistently above 150 millimeters of mercury and a diastolic pressure above 100 millimeters of mercury is considered as high and alarming. On the other hand, systolic pressure below 100 millimeters of mercury and diastolic below 50 is taken as low in the adults. Recent observations indicate that the pressure which is reached in adolescence does not normally rise with age anymore. The average systolic pressure is 110 to 120 millimeters of mercury and diastolic pressure 70 to 80 millimeters of mercury. The normal upper limits of systolic and diastolic pressures are placed at 140 and 90 millimeters of mercury respectively. Here in the table, you can see the average blood pressure and standard deviations in apparently healthy persons. From the table, it is evident that the blood pressure increases with age irrespective of gender. The next factor is gender. In females, both systolic and diastolic pressures are slightly lower than in males up to the age of 45 to 50 years, the beginning of menopause. The third factor is the build. Systolic pressure is usually high in obese persons. In most of the overweight persons, the blood pressure is found to be high. Exercise is the next factor, where you can see in strenuous exercise, the systolic pressure rises and may reach even up to 180 millimeters of mercury. In moderate exercise, there is a slight rise of systolic blood pressure. The next factor is the posture. Diastolic pressure is slightly higher in the standing position. In the recumbent position, however, diastolic pressure is lower than in standing or in sitting position. Sleep alters systolic pressure by about 15 to 20 millimeters of mercury decrease during sleep. After ingestion of meals, there is a slight rise of systolic blood pressure. Emotions or excitement can cause an increase of systolic pressure. Now that we have seen the factors affecting blood pressure, let us now understand the significance of blood pressure. Systolic pressure undergoes considerable fluctuations. Excitements, exercise, meals increase it, while sleep and rest diminish it. The height of systolic pressure indicates the extent of work done by our heart, the force with which the heart is working, and the degree of pressure which the arterial wall have to withstand. Diastolic pressure undergoes much less fluctuations in health and remains within a limited range. Increase of diastolic pressure indicates that the heart is approaching towards its failure. Consequently, variations of diastolic pressure are of greater physiological importance than those of systolic. Diastolic pressure is the measure of peripheral resistance. It indicates the constant load against which the heart has to work. The normal function of blood pressure is to maintain a sufficient pressure head to keep the blood flowing and to provide for the motive force of filtration at the capillary bed, thus assuring nutrition to the tissue cells, formation of urine, lymph, and so on. From the above consideration, it is seen that the height of blood pressure gives correct information about the state of the circulation system and as a whole, and also about the functional condition of the tissue cells and organs. Having understood the meaning and significance of blood pressure, let us now move on to the measurement and recording of blood pressure. Arterial blood pressure can be measured by two methods, namely direct and indirect method. The artery is exposed and an arterial cannula, of which one tapering end is inserted directly into the lumen of the exposed vessel and the other is connected to the U-shaped mercury manometer that shows the actual blood pressure in millimeters of mercury. As the mercury column in one limb descends and in the other limb of the U-tube ascends, the value in the scale will be doubled so as to get the actual blood pressure. For convenience, it is generally considered to be 1 millimeter in the scale equivalent to 2 millimeters of mercury pressure. Before recording the blood pressure, the mercury levels in both limbs of the U-tube must be adjusted to the 0 mark of the scale. For recording pressure, a floating stylus with a writing pointer that marks on the smoke paper may be used. This method is only suitable in animals and gives an idea about the mean pressure. Due to the high inertia of mercury, the blood pressure changes associated with cardiac cycle are damped. Respiratory undulation of mean pressure waves are clearly seen in this direct method. In indirect method, the pressure may be measured without any surgical procedure and thus it is very convenient clinically in human beings. Rivarossi in the year 1896 first introduced this indirect method, and afterwards Korotkov in 1905 introduced a convenient method by which the systolic and diastolic pressures could be ascertained only through listening to the sound of blood flow. This is the standard method of recording blood pressure all throughout the world. In this method, commonly the pressure of the brachial artery is measured. The instrument used is known as sphygmomanometer. Three methods are used, namely oscillatory, palpatory and auscultatory methods. In oscillatory method, inspection of oscillation in spring gauge or mercury manometer is the basis. In this method, a pressure cuff is wrapped over the brachial artery and the oscillations that are produced by the pulsations are observed. The instrument is always kept at the heart level. When the cuff pressure is increased and raised above the systolic pressure, the oscillations disappear, but on releasing the pressure gradually, the oscillations become larger and prominent. The pressure head at which the larger oscillations are seen is considered as the systolic pressure. But on future release of pressure, the oscillations become smaller and disappear. The pressure at which the oscillations just become smaller and disappear is called as the diastolic pressure. In palpatory method, the instrument is kept at the level of the heart and the cuff is tied round the upper arm. Pressure is raised to 200 millimeters of mercury and then gradually released. When the pulse just appears at the wrist, the pressure is noted. This is the systolic pressure. This method is not accurate, but this method, the diastolic pressure cannot be determined. Next is the auscultatory method. The mercury sphygmomanometer is widely regarded as the gold standard for blood pressure measurement. The instrument is kept at the level of the heart and the cuff is tied round the upper arm. Pressure is raised to 200 millimeters of mercury and then gradually released. Variations of sound are heard with a stethoscope placing its chest piece on the brachial artery a little below the cuff. In the picture below, you can see the sphygmomanometer being used. The sounds are heard due to occurrence of turbulence in the flow of blood through the narrowed blood vessels when the manometric pressure just coincides with the systolic blood pressure. Due to giving air pressure in the cuff, the vessel is pressed and the blood flow is obliterated. But while releasing the air pressure gradually, blood just begins to flow through the narrowed blood vessel and the pattern of flow is changed from streamline flow to turbulent flow. When the pressure is further released, normal streamline flow sets in and the sound is no longer heard. In the first phase, there is a sudden appearance of a clear tapping sound. This indicates the systolic pressure. It persists while the pressure falls through a 15 millimeter of mercury. In the second phase, the tapping sound is replaced by a murmur persisting for another 15 millimeters of mercury. In the third phase, the murmur is replaced by a clear gong sound lasting for the next 20 millimeters of mercury. In the fourth phase, a loud gong sound becomes muffled and rapidly begins to fade. This point indicates diastolic pressure. In the fifth phase, all sounds cease and there is absence of sounds. Next is the venous pressure. This is defined as the pressure which is exerted by the blood within the veins. Average venous pressure of human being in recumbent position is about 60 to 120 centimeters of water. The venous pressure can be measured by inserting a needle directly into the antecubital vein and by connecting the needle to a water manometer. Here, learners, you can see the antecubital fossa and the veins therein. Venous pressure is thus a valuable index in determining the efficiency of the heart. One of the recent methods of measuring blood pressure is the use of a digital monitor attached to the pressure cuff, which helps reading the systolic and diastolic pressures directly, as you can see in the picture. Wrist cuffs with digital display are also available to measure blood pressure, as you can see in this picture. Next, we move on to the factors controlling arterial blood pressure. The first factor is the pumping action of the heart. Effectual contraction of the heart is the main factor for controlling the cardiac output, blood pressure, and flow within the blood vessel. Because in each effectual contraction of the ventricle, certain amount of blood is effected out into the aorta. The driving force of blood is mainly created by the pumping action of the heart. The efficiency of the heart is considered upon how much amount of blood is driven out by the heart into the aorta in each beat. The second factor is the cardiac output. Alterations of cardiac output will alter blood pressure. Cardiac output depends upon venous return, force, and frequency of heartbeat. Blood volume affects blood pressure directly by mainly modifying the cardiac output. The third important factor is peripheral resistance. It is the resistance which blood has to overcome while passing through the periphery, that is, the outer regions of the body. The chief seat of peripheral resistance is the arterioles and to a smaller extent the capillaries. Peripheral resistance therefore depends upon the velocity of blood, viscosity of blood, elasticity of arterial walls. Resistance is directly proportional to the first two and inversely proportional to the last two factors. Velocity is defined as the rapidly flowing stream which will have frictional effect than a slower one. Hence, pressure is high in the aorta but low in the capillaries. The next factor is viscosity. Other factors remaining constant, a more viscid blood will have a higher friction than a lesser one. For this reason, plasma transfusion is sometimes more effective to maintain blood pressure than ordinary saline. The next factor determining blood pressure is elasticity. Due to elastic properties, the arteries can either dilate and accommodate considerable amount of blood with relatively less rise of blood pressure. In old age, the arterial walls become stiff and hence blood pressure increases. The next factor is the lumen of the vessel. Peripheral resistance is inversely proportional to the lumen of the vessels. In other words, smaller the vessel, higher will be the resistance. One should expect therefore that the capillaries having the smallest lumen should have the highest pressure, but this is not the case. The velocity of blood being lowest in capillaries, the frictional effect is very low. Hence, pressure is also low. The seat of peripheral resistance is found to be chiefly in the arterioles, where the velocity is fairly high and the lumen is narrow. Peripheral resistance is expressed as mean arterial pressure over cardiac output. Mean arterial pressure can be expressed in dynes per square centimeter by multiplying the pressure in millimeter of mercury by 1332. Elasticity of the arterial walls. In normal diastolic pressure, arterial walls are stretched, but due to the presence of elastic tissues in the walls, they tend to recoil. Due to elasticity of the arterial walls, the blood flow is pulsatile in the arteries. In the capillaries and venules, the flow is continuous. In old age, the expansion of the arterial walls become limited due to sclerotic changes and the blood pressure rises. Here you can see the effect of elasticity on the arterial walls on blood pressure. Next is blood volume. Increase in blood volume will raise both the systolic and diastolic blood pressures due to the increased quantity of blood in the arterial system and greater stretching of the arterial walls. The alteration in blood viscosity will affect the diastolic pressure by its effect on peripheral resistance. The intermolecular friction is greater when viscosity is high. So here you can see the figure depicting viscosity of blood. Next we move on to Poiseuille's law. In 1841, the French physician Poiseuille studied the factors regulating the flow of viscous fluids through the capillary tubes. He showed that resistance to blood flow in any blood vessel proportionally varies directly with the viscosity of blood and also with the length of the blood vessel, and inversely with the fourth part of the radius of the blood vessel. It is expressed by the formula R is equal to eta into L over R to the power 4 into 8 divided by pi square, where R stands for resistance to blood flow, eta for viscosity of blood, L for length of blood vessels, R for radius of blood vessels, 8 for Huygens integration, and R for the cylindrical tube. Taking this value for resistance in the formula, it is found that the blood flow proportionally varies directly with blood pressure and the fourth part of the radius of the blood vessel, and inversely with the viscosity of blood and the length of the blood vessel. The following formula, known as Poiseuille's law, expresses the above relations, that is Bf is equal to Kbp over R, or Bf is equal to Bp into pi over 8 into 1 by eta into R to the power 4 by L, where Bp stands for blood pressure, R for the radius of the blood vessel, eta for viscosity of blood, L for the length of the blood vessel, and pi for the constant factor 3.14. This law is not applicable where the arterial pressure falls below 20 millimeters of mercury. To conclude, blood pressure is thus vital to blood circulation and to all physiological processes of the body, and periodic measurement of blood pressure is vital to prevent and diagnose major health problems. Auscultatory method using sphygmomanometer remains still the most popular method of measuring blood pressure. However, other modern methods such as digital and wrist cuff instruments are also available to measure blood pressure. Regular and periodic monitoring of blood pressure, especially beyond 40 years of age, is vital to prevent major health problems and increase longevity.